The dawn mist curled over the lower Himalayan foothills like pale green muslin, softening the serried terraces of Chaikunda Tea Estate. Dr. Anjali Rao guided her bicycle along the bridle path between rows of dew-jeweled bushes, enjoying the faint aroma of chrysanthemum and wet earth. Birds whistled from the silver oaks planted as windbreaks, and somewhere down in the workers' lines, a ladle clanged against a brass pot, someone's first chai of the day. The estate clinic came into view, a whitewashed bungalow with a tiled veranda and a profusion of hibiscus. She parked, took a last lungful of the scented air, and crossed the threshold just as the gong from the factory sounded for the 6 o'clock muster. Anjali's first patient arrived before the kettle on her desk finished boiling. Kamala, a 19-year-old plucker from Block C, was half carried in by two fellow pickers. Her skin looked dull, her pupils slightly dilated, and she clutched her stomach as if afraid it might escape. "Cramping since dawn," she whispered, "and the world keeps spinning." Anjali slid a stethoscope under the girl's faded shawl, felt for pulse, took temperature. Nothing screamed malaria, typhoid, or the seasonal stomach bugs she treated so often. She started Kamala on fluids, drew blood, and sent an orderly sprinting to the small path lab. As she wrote up the chart, the kettle clicked off. She measured a spoon of orthodox leaf into her porcelain mug, poured water, and waited while the coppery liquor bled down. At home in Mysuru, her grandmother had taught her to read fortunes in tea leaves for fun. At Chaikunda, Anjali had discovered a more practical use. She drank slowly, then tipped the cup, swirling the last mouthful twice clockwise. The leaves clung to the glaze, sketching a sinuous S-shape that merged into a bulb. Snakes and bulbs, folk code for venom. Before she could reflect, a second patient arrived, then a third. By noon, 8 pluckers, all from Block C, lay on cots under the clinic's ceiling fans, each complaining of dizziness, tingling fingers, and knives of pain twisting in the gut. Their prelim blood work looked almost normal. Whatever toxin was at play, it left only the faintest biochemical fingerprints. Estate manager K.M. Nambiar turned up after lunch, crisp in creased khaki and smelling faintly of bergamot. "Doctor, harvest peaks next week. If half the block is down, we lose 40 chests a day. Is this contagious?" Anjali guided him past the screens. "The pattern is too localized. I'm leaning toward poisoning, accidental or otherwise. Let me investigate before calling the district medical officer. Panic will plummet productivity faster than any pathogen." Nambiar's neat moustache twitched. "Very well, but discreetly, please." Left alone, Anjali brewed another cup, this time using a handful of leaves Kamala had been carrying when she collapsed. Again the S-shape, but this time the next curls formed something else. A drooping frond that older tea-tasting charts likened to the calicoot snail, omen of toxic horticulture. 2 identical messages from 2 unrelated sources was enough to prod her onto her bicycle again. Block C hugged the southern slopes where young bushes, barely shoulder-high, were flush with tender tips. The air quivered with cicadas, and sprays of yellow laburnum brightened shade trees. Anjali met Lakshmi Amma, a veteran picker wearing a chartreuse sari and a scabbard mouth of a grin. "Dr. Chechi, you've come hunting trouble, eh?" "I'm afraid trouble beat me here," Anjali said, describing the morning's cases. Lakshmi clicked her tongue. "We felt dizzy last evening too. Thought it was the new pesticide smell." "New pesticide?" She pointed to blue drums stacked under a tarpaulin near the jeep track. "Came last week with the new agronomist. They say it is safe. Smells like kerosene mixed with pumpkin." The agronomist, Vikram Singh, emerged from behind a tea chest, his boots plastered with clay. 20-something, spectacled, and too earnest for his own good, he insisted the pesticide was a low-toxicity pyrethroid approved for organic transitions. We diluted 1% and trial sprayed the boundary trees only. Nowhere near the plucking zone, he said. My own hands would itch otherwise. Still, Anjali borrowed a sampling bottle and filled it with runoff from the tarp's lower edge. She rinsed her cup, brewed a miniature infusion from crushed leaves drenched by that runoff, swirled and read. The residue made a starburst pattern, all jagged rays. She saw it once before, when her veterinary colleague diagnosed strychnine in a poisoned dog. But strychnine wasn't used in tea cultivation for decades. A puzzle. Back at the clinic, the patients improved once hydrated, yet the numbness in their lips worried her. Polyuria pump failure? No, muscarinic symptoms absent. She began jotting side-by-side lists. Organophosphate, alkaloid seeds, metal contamination. Every item sparked but quickly guttered out. There had to be a common vector. That evening, Anjali accepted an invitation to dinner at the bungalow of Mr. Banerjee, the estate's chief tea-taster, a widower with a cavernous laugh and a cupboard full of curios. Over mulligatawny soup, he listened as she summarized the day. Then he leaned back, twirling his silk cravat. In 1968, he said, I handled a consignment of first flush that smelled of ripe jackfruit. 4 of my assistants fainted after sampling. The culprit was gypsum dust used to weigh down wet leaves. The leaves themselves looked innocent, but the tea liquor drew the dust out. Perhaps your pattern reading, what did you see, a snail and a starburst, is telling you the leaf is fine, but the liquor is poisoned. Water supply, Anjali guessed. Banerjee shook his head. If the camp well were fouled, the whole lines would be ill, not merely Block C. On her way home, lantern in one hand, bicycle in the other, she passed the factory canteen. A handful of workers clustered around the samovar, gossiping in low voices. Anjali joined them, accepted a tumbler of steaming chai, and noticed the cook sprinkling a black powder from a tin with the label worn off. Home-ground masala, the cook crowed proudly. She took a polite sip. Then an idea darted through her head. She poured the dregs into a saucer, fanned them with her breath. Pepper husks, cardamom flecks, and tiny black beads like glossy mustard seed. They caught the lamplight differently from peppercorns, almost with a violet sheen. She pocketed 3 beads, rode straight to her bungalow, crushed one with her mortar, infused it in hot water, and studied the after-swirl. The familiar snake reared from the cup, only now its mouth opened in a small starburst. The 2 symbols that had appeared separately all day finally fused. Her scalp tingled the way it used to when, as a medical intern, she prepared to present breakthrough cases at grand rounds. A textbook rested on her shelf. Toxic Flora of the Subcontinent. She turned to the glossy plates near the middle. There, under nightshade relatives, was Clystanthus collinus, odiam, used for ritual suicide in pockets of Tamil Nadu. Seeds exactly like pepper, leaves alkaline but shy in standard assays. The plant's glycosides produced dizziness, gastrointestinal cramps, distal neuropathy, every complaint her patients voiced. Could someone have mixed those seeds intentionally into the chai masala? Or did a forager mistake them for pepper in the jungle fringe? Either way, detection required the very tool she carried between her ears and her teacups. Next morning, a fresh casualty arrived. Rajan, Block C's foreman, who supervised but rarely picked leaves himself. He had not been near the pesticide drums at all, yet he'd drunk 2 tumblers of canteen chai before dawn. That clinched it. Anjali visited the canteen before the breakfast rush, armed with Nambiar's written order to inspect supplies. Shelves overflowed with beaten tin jars, cloves, ginger, pepper, and the unlabelled tin whose rim held smears of black dust. She spread a square of muslin on the table, upended the tin, and separated peppercorns from impostors. Even by eye she could now spot the odd seeds. They were a shade more ovoid, and when sliced exuded no pepper smell, only a faint, bitter almond note. She sealed them in an evidence pouch, then turned to the cook. Suresh, short and baby-faced, twisted the hem of his apron. "I buy from one trader in the bazaar. Same for years." "Show me yesterday's invoice," Anjali said. He fetched a carbon copy. "Quantity, 2 kilos Kali Mirch, 1 kilo Jeera, 5 kilos Jaggery. Supplier, Jaya Spice Agency." She memorized the address. She and Harish, the estate welfare officer, drove the Mahindra jeep to town. Jaya Spice operated from a locked storefront. The neighbours said the proprietor was away at a wedding. In back, though, a teenage clerk whiled away time carving hearts into a ledger. When pressed, he admitted a mistake. "We ran short of pepper last consignment. Boss said substitute something dark so weight matches. We used odiam. It's from roadside shrubs. Villagers burn leaves to keep snakes away. Nobody eats it, madam, we know. But he said it would be roasted in oil, harmless." Anjali felt nausea that had nothing to do with poison. Greed disguised as thrift, gambling with human guts. Yet if the spice had reached only this canteen batch, why were only Block C workers ill? She considered. Those workers trekked the farthest to factory. Thus they gulped canteen chai before others to warm up after chilly dawn wind. Rajan likewise arrived early to punch attendance. The timeline held. She insisted on the trader's entire sack of pepper, arranged for police seizure, then returned to the estate. Most patients were on the mend, but clinical improvement did not guarantee biochemical absolution. Clystanthus toxins could precipitate renal failure on day 3. She adjusted treatment, added bicarbonate infusions, monitored electrolytes. Meanwhile, she reported findings to district headquarters, carefully emphasizing the accidental nature of substitution to preempt talk of sabotage. Evening descended in a hush of cicadas, yet her mind refused to rest. Peppercorn mistake still required a human conduit inside Chaikunda. Someone had to collect that mislabeled sack and pay for it. Back in the canteen, she watched Suresh kneading dough for chapatis, his eyes red-rimmed from worry. He caught her look and crumbled. "It's my fault, Dr. Amma. I bought from that shop because it was 10 rupees cheaper per kilo. Cook's allowance small. Didn't know the seeds were poison, I swear." She weighed his words against her memories of Kamala's face contorted with pain. Rage flared, then ebbed. Suresh was barely 20, supporting widowed mother and 2 school-going sisters. The law would crucify him for criminal negligence. Nambiar, though stern, prided himself on paternalistic benevolence. Perhaps an internal penalty could satisfy justice while sparing the family destitution. Next morning, she convened a meeting on the veranda. Manager Nambiar, welfare officer Harish, agronomist Vikram, Lakshmi Amma representing pickers, and Suresh in a threadbare shirt. She laid out the sequence of events: mislabeled spice, unintentional poisoning, rapid clinical response. Then she poured tea for each attendee, intentionally leaving the cups half full. When the conversation stalled, she tilted her own cup, showing leaves arranged in a neat row of dots like stepping stones. In my grandmother's readings, she said quietly, this pattern means he who errs must walk a path until he learns. Suresh will retain his position, but henceforth training in toxic botany, weekly inspections and purchase protocols will be instituted. The estate will fund medical follow-up for every affected worker, and the spice trader will face the magistrate. Lakshmi sipped, cheeks dimpling. Good. And maybe a raise for canteen allowance so our chai has real pepper, not roadside weed. Nambiar grunted but nodded. Over the next week the patients recovered fully. No renal failure, no neuropathy. Word spread that the lady doctor had solved a riddle using teacups. Children followed her bicycle chanting, Pata doctor, cha doctor, leaf doctor, tea doctor. Even Mr. Banerjee, veteran of 6 decades and 9 tea districts, asked her secretly for a lesson in reading the swirl. One afternoon, the monsoon broke. Rain hammered corrugated roofs, turned pathways to chocolate rivers, and wrapped the estate in a hush deeper than any Sunday. Anjali sat on her bungalow steps, watching water bead along palm fronds. In her hands was a glazed cup of second flush from Block C itself, the very bushes whose pickers she had saved. She tasted malt, hints of raisin, a shy whisper of smoke. No snail, no starburst, only the clean reverberation of untouched leaf. She drained the cup, inverted it on the saucer, and lifted after 3 heartbeats. The pattern that greeted her was simple, a slender branch with 3 bifurcations, each tipped with a fledgling leaf. The symbol of new beginnings, according to her grandmother. Outside, clouds cracked to reveal a narrow bar of gold over the western ridge. On the main road, pickers' children ran screaming into puddles, splashing each other with rainwater and giggles. Anjali smiled. In a corner of her mind, she listed tomorrow's tasks. Update the clinic inventory, organize Suresh's botany class, check on Kamala's electrolytes. But just for this moment, she let the peace steep inside her like delicate tea, warm, astringent, and entirely enough.